Fantastic. Good morning and welcome. I'm Austin Holmes, your host of the Dallas Housing Coalition's Housing for All webinar. I'm also a senior development associate at Dominium. On behalf of Dominium, I also serve on as a member of the Dallas Housing Coalition Steering Committee. Today is the 46th installment of the Housing for All webinar series, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it's truly big enough for everyone. We hope you have been enjoying these impactful one-on-one conversations with DHC members and other community leaders who are Dallas's biggest advocates for keeping Dallas affordable. We are honored to have Dallas City Council member and my City Council member, Chad West, joining us to discuss the successful passage of parking reform 3 weeks ago, the final few days of the legislative session, and what else we can look forward to locally. Councilmember West has represented District 1, the North Oak Cliff area, since 2019. For the past 6 years, he has been a champion on the Dallas City Council for more attainable housing solutions. From our May 2024 bond campaign to the adoption of Forward Dallas 2.0. We thank him for his service and look forward to continuing to work together. Before we begin, congratulations, Councilmember West, on being reelected for your fourth term.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today and for your advocacy for what I see as our most number one priority in the city is the need for more attainable housing.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a huge issue. And so we really appreciate all the work you're doing. And we're excited to discuss a few of your successes here and some of the next things to look forward to. So for anyone who might be hearing from you for the first time, could you give us a quick background on your experience living and working in Oak Cliff and what has shaped your priorities and leadership style as a policymaker?
Sure. Yeah, I came to Oak Cliff going on 17 years ago and moved down there. I moved there because of the diversity, just the cool factor that Oak Cliff is, as you
Yeah.
know. And I love the types of homes that are there. You know, the sort of the mix of the old and new, and I really have always loved arts and crafts style homes, and so I
Yeah.
found one that was a 1920s house that had had some renovations, and I ended up doing some more. And back then, Oak Cliff was a little more affordable than it is now.
Mhm.
I have seen over the years how the real estate prices have grown astronomically.
Wow.
And if I had been starting off as a baby lawyer now, there's no way I could afford to get in our neighborhood. You know,
Mm.
back then they were kind of giving out mortgages to everybody, and I probably shouldn't have been given one, but I kind of slipped in with a lot of folks and made it work. I look at the little 2-1 house that I bought for $160,000, and I saw it listed for $400,000 the other day, and it
Wow.
hasn't had any updates as far as I know since I moved in.
Yeah.
So it's indicative, I think, of what's to come and going to continue in that trend. So when I got on city council, I realized pretty quickly that we're in a housing crisis, and it's going to just keep getting worse if we don't take it seriously and do something about it. And I've really taken policy positions from the beginning, and have not stopped that take us on a path, at least in my opinion, towards better affordability and more housing options in the future. And I'm going to keep doing that for my last 2 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really fantastic. So, not long after you were elected to city council, you initiated the process to reform Dallas's antiquated and burdensome parking requirements. And then on May 14th, the Dallas City Council adopted final changes by 14-1 margin. How did that feel? And what are you most excited about in terms of the benefits that will come from this reform?
Parking reform getting passed after 5 years felt awesome. I mean, that was such a long reform. It took such a long time. You know, it's crazy when the reason it got filed, and I'll try to do the short version of this story. Was the experience in my own district of the boutique hotel case, which a lot of you guys have probably heard before, but it was a hotelier, an entrepreneur was trying to convert a 1920s 1920s Art Deco building, block away from Bishop Arts,
Mhm.
into a 12-room hotel with a restaurant kind of in the back and a like pool cabana area. The parking code in this area, because it wasn't inside the Bishop Arts zoning, which allows reductions, it was outside of it, just barely, was going to require one parking space for each of the 12 rooms, so 12 spots, plus 25 parking spaces for the 2,500 square foot restaurant,
Mm.
which is like, if you think of it, that's like basically the size of a Chipotle, typical
Yeah.
Chipotle, about that
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
Plus, and so the total parking required on one third of an acre was going to be 37 parking spaces. So the code didn't take into account that people staying in the hotel might also be eating in the restaurant, or that people might be walking over from Bishop Arts, or might ride the streetcar, which is literally across the street,
Yeah.
or that there's Uber or Lyft. And so it was going to kill the project. And
Yeah.
fortunately, the plan commission said, they got it, and they waived a lot of the requirements. So did the city
Yeah.
council. But in the time it took for that long bureaucratic zoning process to go through, the market turned, and it was no longer feasible. And even
Mm.
worse, someone broke in and burned down the building. So
Mm.
we lost a building because we prioritized parking over
Okay.
people and over entrepreneurism. That opened my eyes to how bad the parking code was. I had some early housing advocates, even before you guys formed up, that were coming to me saying, it's ridiculous that you have to have one parking space for every bedroom in an
Yeah.
apartment complex. It
Yeah.
makes it unaffordable for people, and it incentivizes builders to not build three-bedroom apartments, which are needed for families, because they got to build extra parking. So it needed to be looked at, and we opened it, and I think it ended up in a pretty good place.
Yeah, no, it really did. And I love the point that you made about, the incentivization of three bedrooms or larger bedroom units that are really needed for families. You look at the statistics, uh, folks and families are renting for longer, and the need for those larger bedroom sizes is very much there. But it's not being met in the market at all. And so it's really impactful whenever those parking changes come, and allows developers to get more creative, and do different structures with larger bedroom types for families. So that's awesome. That's really
Exactly.
awesome.
Like, I'm a single dad, and I've got two kids. Ideally, I have very fortunate to have got into a house before I would have been priced out.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't, I'd probably be renting.
Mhm.
And I don't need three parking spaces. I have one
Yeah.
car. There's three people in my house.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah,
it's
they're not driving anywhere quite yet.
we
Yeah.
were we were the yeah we were behind the times, and in fact the code hadn't been updated since the 1960s. So
Wow.
very excited to be done with that. I
Yeah.
think in the future we can. I won't probably be around, but the city council in the years to come can really take further steps,
Yeah.
because I think ours was incremental, a little bit. I think we could do better in the future, but I'm excited with what we have. I don't want to diminish it at all.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's exciting. So this Monday, June the 2nd, is Sine Die, the end of the 89th Texas legislative session. The Dallas Housing Coalition worked hard to support bills reforming landowner vetoes, allowing residential and mixed-use development in commercially zoned land, and encouraging office to residential conversions. How might these housing-related bills, which have passed both chambers, help or hinder Dallas's housing goals?
Both of the SB 15 and SB 2835 are of course going to be beneficial if they make it all the way through. The minimum lot size bill, you might remember when we tried to bring that up with the city. Do you remember that? Were you kind of like engaged during all that
I
process?
wasn't quite as engaged, but then got the backstory, and understood the the issues that were stated, and the pushback
Yeah.
and everything. So yeah,
People lost their minds in the
yeah,
city when five of us filed this memo to just have a conversation
yeah,
about what it would look like to modify the minimum lot size requirements in the city
mhm,
from 5,000 mostly to like something else. And it's like,
Yeah.
why is 5,000 square feet why is that a magic number? Why is
Yeah.
that?
Nothing about it.
Why
Yeah.
does it matter, so much? And well, the neighborhoods may not look the same. Well, is that so awful that you might
Yeah.
have a backyard that's carved out so that someone else can get a house on a 2,000 square foot lot?
Yeah.
Let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
And people didn't want to do that.
Yeah. Just have a discussion. Yeah.
Oh, council members lost their mind on that.
Yeah.
So it was a discussion we had at the time. If we don't do it as a city and kind of figure out what we want, the legislature is probably going to do it on
Mhm.
their own, and it will become bipartisan because you've got the far right who is all about raw property rights. I don't want any government telling me what my property rights should be. If I want to cut up my lot, I'm going to cut up my lot. And then you've got your truly progressive
Yeah.
Democrats who believe in housing and housing
Yeah.
for all, and are open to kind of pushing through the NIMBY
Yeah.
to address it. So you've got the sort of far reaches on both parties coming together for these bills,
Yeah.
and I think it's exciting. I'm not sure how it will translate on the ground in Dallas,
Yeah.
and it will certainly be worth diving into that with staff. I'm
Mhm.
willing, and certainly in my last term, to bring back up a hopefully productive discussion about
Mhm.
minimum lot sizes in the city,
Yeah.
and just to see if we can get a little more movement on that. And then
Yeah.
on the other bill you mentioned, I think, which is 2835,
Mhm.
parking and staircases are the two biggest costs in
Yes.
apartment complexes. And so if we don't have to build multiple staircases, if you can limit it to one that's centrally located,
Mhm.
I think you'd cut down on the cost, which we know are passed along to tenants. So I
Yeah.
think they could both, that one especially, I think I'm excited to see it come through.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I could, speak from experience in terms of just looking at designs of the new construction communities we intend to create. Yeah, the parking the staircase, it very much adds up, and it does ultimately result in, higher rents for tenants. And a lot of folks don't realize kind of those knock-on effects and how it ultimately will be borne by the tenants. And people wonder why we have a housing crisis and why people can't afford to live in the communities in which they work. And it's a lot of these kind of hidden rules that are really shaping the built environment in a really interesting way, that we're able to kind of alter with the passage of some of these bills. So that's really, yeah, I really really are excited about that, and think you're on the right side of that.
Well, I've got to give credit to Philip Kingston, who's a former council member, who worked with council member Ridley, who's
Mhm.
his council member, and myself and staff on we have a city version of this, which we've already passed, which um, we were finding that in a lot of multi-family zoned areas in the city, uh, duplexes were allowed to be built instead of a small apartment complex. And most of the time, instead of building an 8 unit complex or a whatever 6 unit or 10 unit complex, a builder would actually just throw up a couple $1 million duplexes.
Yeah,
And the reason we were hearing that this is happening is because of that requirement for additional construction of staircases.
yeah,
And and so, two staircases for 8 units, I mean, it
yeah,
makes it really not doable. And
yeah.
we ended up following some other cities at Kingston's suggestion
Mhm.
that have already made that change in their local code,
Yeah,
which I think in the future will make a big difference. We didn't really have any pushback either because this is all occurring in, MF, multifamily zoned areas.
yeah,
So it wasn't a big controversial item, really passed through without a bunch of fireworks.
yeah.
And I'm glad to see the states doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, it is awesome. That's very, very cool. So several of the bills we worked on would promote new housing types, like smaller starter homes on smaller lots. And you kind of touched on that a little bit, but also, accessory dwelling units, like you said, the single stay apartments. And while Texas will become the first state to legalize six-story single stair apartment buildings in its building code, and we will sorry, and we remain hopeful, Senate Bill 15, which decreases minimum lot sizes size requirements in larger cities will pass, the accessory dwelling unit bill died in the House before this past Tuesday's midnight deadline. Why are these types of zoning reforms so crucial to the city of Dallas? And do you think there's an appetite to re-examine Dallas's ADU ordinance locally? I know you touched a bit on the staircase aspect, but maybe if you focus on the ADUs, kind of
Yep.
what are your thoughts there in terms of how it
I
helps?
was most
Yeah,
disappointed about the ADU bill.
yeah,
So you guys, if you've ever like seen me doing Zooms from City Council, you've probably seen my whiteboard, which
yep. The
I
famous whiteboard.
created 6 years ago at the recommendation of Omar Narvaez, so I can track what I've done. So this is mostly my housing stuff here, housing and homelessness in this top left quadrant. Look what's left. Can you see that?
Yep. Yep.
ADUs. It's the
ADUs.
last thing that's on there, and I
Yeah.
mean, no real update since 24. It's the last thing that's not in green as a completed item because we haven't done it as a city, and now, unfortunately, the state hasn't done it. I mean, ADUs is a way for, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this has knows what an accessory dwelling unit is, but the short version is it's like a small granny flat, little
Yeah.
apartment, a little unit in the back of your house, a cabana or something.
Yeah.
And the benefits are recognized really, nationwide. It allows homeowners to make income from their own property. Can have relatives age in place gracefully in the back.
Yeah.
It's really not, or college kids, coming back home to stay with the parents. So it's an opportunity for really generational wealth to be built as well, and for housing. So there's
Yeah.
not a whole lot of detriments to it. If
Yeah.
you get the design standards in place that make it where it's not too intrusive.
Yeah.
Um, I actually asked staff about this last week, city staff,
Mhm.
and they informed me that we'll be addressing it through zoning or code reform, which is coming in the next 2 years.
Okay.
So we already had Forward Dallas 2.0,
Yep.
and now what will follow that is code reform. And they anticipate that being a part of it. I'm hopeful that will happen, and I trust staff on this. I'm also going to look at the areas that we went through with the West Oak Cliff area plan.
Mm.
And most of those, if not all of those neighborhoods within that area of 44,000 neighbors, told me they wanted ADUs. They liked
Mm.
ADUs and would be acceptable to that. So I'm
Yeah.
going to also explore an expedited zoning overlay process for those neighborhoods.
That's
Um,
really
you
cool.
have told me that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope I don't have to because I hope code reform is going to get
That
it
takes
done.
care of it.
But
Yeah.
this is kind of my backup
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that doesn't
It's good to
happen.
have a few different ways to go about it. Yeah, ADUs a lot it could really do a lot of good. And like you said, there's generational wealth benefits, and then there's intergenerational living, just
That's
living
right.
with different generations. That's
Mhm.
great with it. And so yeah, it overall seems, some of the things honestly that passed seemed in some ways more controversial.
I
And
know, right? I
yeah,
thought
so
so too.
yeah,
It's
so it's interesting that that's got taken out, but hopeful that through your plan and your plan B, we can kind of get that done. Yeah, so the Dallas City Council frequently reviews and approves various affordable and mixed income housing projects, such as the Caroline, which received a $2 million allocation of bond funds this week that leverages the Dallas Public Facility Corporation's tax exemption. How do these developments fit into the broader strategy to address Dallas's housing shortage, particularly for low to moderate income residents? And how can we better use existing or add new tools to develop on this housing strategy?
So the Dallas Public Facilities Corporation, the PFC, and the Housing Finance Corporation, the HFC, they are both our two most powerful tools in the city we have right now.
Yep.
Together, the PFC and the HFC comprise about 71% of all affordable housing production in the city. It's
Mm,
massive. They're massive. And if we try to put any unnecessary roadblocks in their way,
yeah.
we will fall behind. And we're not even really building enough to meet
Yeah.
the needs of the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So anytime I would encourage your organization and any of your supporters to pay a lot of attention to when council is hearing cases on the PFC or the HFC,
Hmm.
because these cases are so important. And they are they are really the only thing we can control locally to build
Yeah,
affordable housing other than like the permit office. But
yeah,
all of our other affordable housing production, or a large part of it, is contingent on money from Washington and
yeah,
from the federal government. And we don't know what's going to happen up there. You know, we've been told we're going to have lots of cuts from the current administration on
yeah,
on housing and homelessness programs. So
yeah.
we really need to hone in on the tools we can control, which are the HFC and PFC.
Yeah, no, I definitely working frequently with HSCs and PFCs, and they are an incredibly powerful tool. And I like the way you put it. Control what you can control. A lot of things are not in your control or in Dallas's control as a city, but some things are. And so it's really important for us to pay attention to what's going on with HSC and with the PFC. Yeah. So Dallas and Collin counties have seen tremendous success lowering our homeless counts for 4 years in a row through the Street to Home initiative and other collaborative efforts. How have you seen the city improve its approach to homelessness, and what metrics are you looking at most closely to assess the effectiveness and efficiency?
So I was here in the first term when we began converting the homelessness response system over to what it is today. It was thanks to a lot of people behind the scenes, Charlie O'Connell, who's a D1 resident as well, who brought the Meadows Foundation into the world, and the Meadows Foundation funded the consultant who ended up coming in and explaining to us how Houston was the only major city in Texas and one of the only ones in the country that had effectively reduced their population, the amount of people experiencing homelessness.
Mhm.
We were on the right track. We're measuring it through the point in time count, which is
Mhm.
the HUD recognized data collection for determining if you're successful or not.
Mhm.
It's not perfect, but it's the only data collection mechanism recognized nationwide, and
Yeah.
everybody uses it. We are one of the few cities that is seeing a consistent reduction. And I've had to explain this a few ways, and I've never done it quite perfectly, or even all that well in some cases. But I will say, like, the generally what's happening now that wasn't happening before is that all of these wonderful nonprofit providers and churches and institutions that used to be kind of acting independently and
Mhm.
doing good things for homeless people, but not really working within one system.
Yeah.
The vast majority of them now, not all of them, but the vast majority are now working together, reporting up through one system and trying to consolidate their resources.
Mhm.
And what it took to get to that point was our philanthropic community led by the Meadows Foundation, some of our private corporations, the city and the county to all get on board that, hey, we're not going to start parsing out money to different groups unless they are reporting their data and all working in sync towards the same goal of reducing homelessness. Because you might have, let's just call him John Doe, a homeless individual who wants to, generally homeless people want to avoid dealing with people in authority. They want to avoid going to places where they're going to be tracked. I don't blame them,
Yeah.
frankly. But with, in the past, this John Doe would go to one church and get some food and then go over to another one and get some clothes and then go over here, and he has everything he needs so he can go
Yeah.
kind of sleep over under the bridge.
Yeah.
um, and no one's really tracking him or talking. Well, in this case now, the first church is talking to the second location through the system and saying, all right, John Doe has been here and here
Yeah.
at this location when he's there, and try to talk to him and get to know him and build a rapport with him. So and not just a volunteer who's at the organization, but an actual
Yeah.
trained person who understands how the system works. So it's not really like curing cancer to what we're doing here. It's not that
Yeah. Just
complicated.
kind of
It's
some
really just getting
coordination.
everybody talking and reporting and
Yeah.
sharing resources. It's working.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It really is kind of amazing that just the coordination can help in that manner. Are there any other, things you mentioned, Houston, I've looked into Houston and their tremendous success in kind of really being a leader, nationwide and
Mhm.
reducing homelessness. And are there any other things that you're hoping to bring to Dallas from there or from your broader research into what we can do?
On the homelessness world, I think the best thing the city can do, like
Mhm.
city council can do, is let the professionals handle it. And that is Housing Forward are
Mhm.
professionals who are tasked with that job. When I see council members coming in and
Mhm.
trying to tell them what they should be doing differently,
Yeah.
it gives me a lot of concern because
Yeah.
what they are doing is working. It may not be as fast as we would like, or
Mhm.
and certainly not perfect.
Yeah.
But if someone nationwide had figured out the perfect scenario, we'd all be modeling it. But we're
Yeah.
modeling after the best that's out there. So
Yeah.
for me, this one is not one I need to get in the weeds on like I do on
Yeah.
accessory dwelling units or parking
Yeah.
reform, which I
Yeah.
had to do.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. All right. Well, so finally, I think we can both agree there's a lot more work left ahead of us. You've been looking at Dallas's city-owned real estate in your role as chair of the Government Performance and Financial Management Council Committee. We know a comprehensive development code update is coming down the pike. What else do you recommend our members and audience keep an eye out for locally to stay engaged on all the things that we need to be working on over the next few years?
Yeah, no, great question. Paying attention to the Housing and Homelessness Solutions Committee meetings and the agendas is very key.
Hmm.
Even on agenda items that seem non-controversial, I think it's very important to read them and pay attention to them. It's one meeting a month, and
Hmm.
I think we have about 10 meetings a year.
Hmm.
The mayor's about to appoint, well, he's had two open seats still, seats that have not been filled by council members from districts 11 and 8 because they're in runoffs.
Yep.
Um, I think once that happens, the mayor will fairly quickly appoint committees,
Hmm.
and it will be very interesting to see who he puts on the committee that's going to be tasked with housing and homelessness. And so I would pay attention to that. And then your members that are super hyper engaged members
Hmm.
get to know those council members particularly and pay attention to all the issues we just talked about today.
Yeah.
Code reform is going to be a bigger game changer than Forward Dallas 2.0
Hmm.
because it's going to actually enact all of the proposals. So that would be, I would save up your energy and your time and your days off for
Yeah.
code reform because we're going to need you down at the Horseshoe for that, just like you guys were there for parking reform and Forward Dallas 2.0.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Those are really great ways to stay engaged, and so we're looking forward to being right there with you as we move forward through those things. So thank you, Councilmember West, for joining us this morning and for all the work you do behind the scenes to really make the series and everything that we've discussed move forward and ultimately be successful. I know as a District 1 resident, I really, appreciate getting to speak with you and learn how you're thinking of through these things and have really enjoyed, seeing what you've done for District 1 and really broader the city of Dallas.
Thank
So
you.
so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
For sure, for sure. So before we sign off today, we encourage everyone to attend the Dallas Housing Coalition's next event, an office opening and red tape cutting ceremony on Thursday, June the 12th. Follow our social media for more updates and to stay connected with our Housing for All webinar series. Visit our website, dallashousingcoalition.com, to subscribe to our communication and get involved by joining the coalition today. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning in to the 46th Housing for All webinar, where we discuss whether Dallas is big